the decoder, what we have to do is once we encode the shellcode, obviously it isn't going to function when it lands on the target system, right? So we have to prepend that with a decoder. Now this decoder itself will process the data after it appears on the target host. So unfortunately, a lot of exploits are written so that when you jump from into the NOP section, you know, hopefully they wrote it good enough so that like they're jumping fairly close to the beginning of these NOPs and not just like right, you know, right at the end, and they just kind of coded it and it worked and they said, okay, killer, there we go. Because, you know, we're going to eat up a small portion of those available no-ops. So your shellcode is effectively like, you know, increased in size. So, I mean, even if the network intrusion detection system were on the host that was being exploited, it would not be able to detect anything because this is all happening on the application layer. And again, signature analysis, you know, it should be unable to match the shellcode or the decoder or the return addresses that are normally placed at the tail end of your buffer overflow. This is because I incorporated a number of primitives to modulate the return addresses based on your tolerances and stuff like that. The decoder itself also is in a polymorphic form. Now, polymorphic is essentially the ability to exist in multiple forms and be functionally identical. So, you know, we'll go into that a bit later on. Oh, by the way, I mean, anybody feel free to pop up and ask some questions. You know, I love interactive crowds. It's extremely polymorphic, you know, in this very... Well, currently I only support one decoder because the encoder is in C and it's in the API, and it encodes it and sends it out. And I've just been concentrating on making it cross-platform rather than adding, like, you know, tons and tons of bells and whistles to the decoder right now. So I'm trying to get it across the platform.
It is polymorphic, but has one variation currently?
Well, you'll see. It had. Yeah, fucking guy.
Are you going to tell me that you don't have like an intelligent decoder based on genetic algorithms which actually adapt to any execution environment?
Actually, I just added. The question was whether or not I have genetic algorithms based on to detect, you know, to breed new decoders which are able to survive in the wild, right? Not currently, you know, this is on the horizon, right? If well, this is just the public version, Joey. I mean, come on, okay? I think we had another question.
How many bytes of NOP sled do you take up?
You can configure that to your particular tolerances, right? So if you've got a exploit that you've only got like, you know, 200 bytes worth of NOP sled, you can configure the decoder to, you know, fine-tune how it behaves. And, you know, I've had decoders as small as like, you know, 40 bytes and as large as 400. So it's fairly, pretty much up to you.
K2.
Yes?
Real men don't use NOPs.
Oh, really? You made me skip my slide, man. Real men don't.
You know that you don't.
I don't use NOPs.
There you go.
Now, the attack payload of a buffer overflow, just a brief overview, typically consists of these three sections which we've got to, you know, take a look at. We've got this NOP sled, which is the initial portion. We've got the shellcode in the middle, and we've got these jumps at the back, you know, doing your framer register overwrites or whatever the hell you're doing, that will point back into the NOPs somehow. Now, these three individual sections are what the IDSs will, you know, be focusing on, you know, one of these three. That was the Canadian beat. Also format strings again, and we can adapt this for their use later on. NOP substitutions. Currently, the NOP instructions at the beginning of the shellcode are substituted. Now, we've got an extensible list of possible replacements that can comply to whatever restrictions that your particular code needs to adhere to. For instance, if you say, I need 2 upper compliant code, 2 lower compliant in space, or I've got various banned characters which can't appear in the generated shellcode, this API will automatically generate that for you. So if you've got If you don't really have any skills to like write that code yourself and you just want to cut and paste, you can try and see if it can identify a sequence that will generate the code for you. But the more restrictions you place on the encoded shellcode, the obviously the less permutations you can actually form, right? I mean, I've had anywhere from 3.5 billion possible shellcode or packets to send to 50, right? Just because of certain restrictions in the exploit. On this note is primarily for Intel, the Intel architecture. Traditionally, guys coding Intel stuff don't really have to worry about the alignment, which is like where you're going to jump into the NOPs. So if you're jumping in there, and traditionally it's only a 1-byte NOP instruction, if we enable like multi-byte, instructions to be in that section of the shellcode, there's the possibility that you're going to jump into the middle of an instruction and not going to be able to execute in the way that you normally would. So, but I mean, I would encourage the use of multi-byte NOPs because I mean, this greatly increases the the amount of codes that will appear within that section. I think I've got about 28 right now. So that's 28 out of a possible 255. So like a little better than 10% of character space will be available in that NOPS section. That I've heard from statistics, degree guys that this really isn't quite what you need to have to be statistically resilient to analysis. So if you enable these multi-byte, features, that will allow you to have virtually limitless amount of characters appearing within that NOP sled. Okay, now, Joy.
Have you seen any ideas which can actually decipher bytecode encodings to actually see which architecture specific it is? And I mean, I'm trying to say like, is there any ideas which is like not plain basic stupid?
No, they're all pretty dumb. Like, they they don't really have the current ability to analyze the instructions right now and see exactly what they're doing or the data per se that I have seen. Oh, the question was if I have seen any IDSs out there which can actually intelligently analyze the data sections of these attacks and actually kind of understand what they're doing, kind of, maybe similar to some virus scanner stuff, which can actually analyze the data within, like, applications or what have you, and identify a polymorphic attack or identify some kind of virus signature. Now, the basic assumption that we've got to make is that there's always more than one way to do it, especially in computer science, right? I mean, how many ways can you get that X equivalence there, right? There's 3 right there, but I bet you there's like at least several billion more that you can probably do. So, we're going to embed that into our decoder so that it will be, stronger, more able to withstand signature analysis, right? So, I mean, if I needed to calculate pi or I needed to calculate x there, I could alternatively select, one of these mechanisms. The decoder itself. The decoder itself, it isn't just one decoder. It's like a decoder with a tree kind of system that can alternately select which way it's going, on a random basis. And you can extend that if you feel that you found another way to add 1 to a register. You can just kind of add that instruction in there, and it can do that. There are also alternate instruction paths, so that if we need to calculate n, we can use various values that we have also to calculate that. There's a README with the distribution. If you read the README, it goes into a little bit more technical details of exactly what's going on. And of course, you can always just kind of read the source. That'll tell you exactly what's going on. I clicked already, but this thing's kind of lagged out. Non-operational code padding. This is the euphemism that I use to identify this expansion here. You see L plus A plus M equals E. But I mean, that's functionally equivalent to like